Yeah, so last time what we had a huge surface across the centre, which I've now done a trim convert on, and I thought when you do a trim convert and it's quite, from one shape to quite a dramatically different shape, you always expect the CVs to go a bit crazy. If it had been, because our original surface was out here, so I was expecting these CVs to be totally crazy. In fact, they're not too bad. Now let me go into the layers menu. Hang on a second. There's a layers menu. I've literally just sat down in front of the computer, so my brain's not quite clear. Object lister, this one's a thought. Okay, let's go on here. So we've got, so let's go into the top layer, which is, as you can see, not completely up to date. I'm just going to throw everything into the top layer, to be honest. Because there's no point in. Okay, so when I did a trim convert, sometimes if it's a small change, like if the original surfaces had an edge out here, you might expect that when you trim it to be tidier. You might also expect this to be accurate in terms of I've trimmed it back to this surface here, or the intersect. In this case, because we've got a very low number of CVs, a low degree in this direction, then I'm not expecting that to be accurate. And we can see that if we go into let me go into evaluate, and I'll go surface continuity P0 G0. And if I compare the curve on surface, which is all those square symbols going up there, with the edge, you can see it says, maybe you can't see from there, but you can see it says 5 mil or so. Probably told you this before, but if you go into locators and you can move that locator, if you can't see something like that, you can actually grab hold of it. Or you can do that with it. I can grab hold of it. Trying to grab hold of the text. I'm not sure where to grab it. Probably that in with that arrow. Should be able to move that around. I'm probably not grabbing it at the right point. Okay, well, let's delete that anyway. So there's 5 mil out, which is obviously a large amount. But we're not really interested in how accurate that is. It's not important. Let me just get rid of the CVs on that curve. What I'm going to try and do is, I could increase the degree and get that accurate, but I don't want to do that because I'd rather keep the degree low. It's just easier to modify. So in a situation like this, where the intersect between the two is quite complicated, the best thing to do is just extend it slightly so it goes right through that surface, and then although we're not actually working on an edge of a surface which is on that surface, it doesn't actually matter. We can just extend it, but we're sufficiently close that we can have almost direct control over this shape. That's what I'm after. That's one of the things I'm after. The other reason for doing the trim convert is that if you remember last time I was saying the sections I got there weren't quite right, and so what I want to do is be able to sort of fix that edge and then get the sections working better, so that if I go into my section menu, cross section editor, and put on X sections here, and I'll do those at 200. You can see I'm not following the data very well here. It needs to curve down more, so it's more consistent throughout, and we get this sort of flat region tighter towards the outside edges. So let's start off with the top view, and I'll rotate it around that way. Now that surface needs to be symmetric. So whenever you do something like trim convert, it breaks all the history. So I've got to put on symmetry here to bring that in. You'll find that there's so many operations where symmetry gets removed because it's a history thing, and you just got to be aware of that. And you'll soon see when you start moving CVs around, of course, that the history is not being maintained. Now, the other thing I want to do, so the first thing I want to do here is to tidy up this outside edge, and I'm just going to do it by I mean, in terms of patterns of CVs, which is all important, we've got this pattern going on the front edge. That's absolutely fine. Back edge is completely straight. So every pattern in between ought to be progressing towards this one. This one is sort of reasonable. When we get here, it's going completely the wrong way, and that's all over the place. You know, all of those are all over the place. Now, I'm not going to worry about whether I'm going to pull this off the data because it doesn't really matter. I just want to get the pattern of CVs working better. So I'm going to go and now what I need to do, because I'm now on my workstation and I didn't change this here, I need to go into my hotkey menu because I haven't got this set up correctly. And I'm going to look for the transform CV. Seems to have caps lock on. I don't know whether that matters. It probably does. Let's do transform. I'm not even sure whether there might be a space between the two, of course, but transform's coming up with that lot. Transform CV. Let's see if we can get because I can never remember where these things are. The control panel, it's in there. So I'd never remember that, to be honest. It's a big job. You know, there's a search thing there. So on transform CV, I just want to make that the letter C. So when I press the letter C, it will now, it doesn't come up with the menu, but when I press the space bar, it will come up with that menu that I was after. So let's go into, I mean, it's actually on here. I hadn't noticed that, but it's on there. But I prefer to press the C button. It's just easier, I find. So I just want to move CVs around, and I'm looking at this outer edge. So I'm going to have to, you know, be quite brave here and just move these and hope that it's all going to work out really. Now that line there isn't completely straight, and it doesn't. There's no reason it should be, but it's quite close to straight. So I might use that later on to my advantage. But I'm going to move that point. I'm just going to have to move it. There's no, you know, just got to take my life in my hands and move that point really, and then I can move that point as well. So you can see I'm pulling it outside of the intersect, but that's what I've got to do. I'll pull that one as well. Maybe push that one in forward a bit. So it's a bit more consistent. I really want to make this so that, I mean, there will be some SE shape in there. This one could maybe go back in the X direction a bit. Not really, you know, I'm not trying to design that shape precisely. I'm just trying to get these so that the CVs follow. So it looks to me as though an S pattern of some sort, but it doesn't matter. I just want them tidier than they are. And sometimes the CVs can look a bit weird especially when you're trying to create a huge surface, which is what this is really. This point here, I could just move it in the X direction, but because we've got, hopefully this surface is reasonably close to the data in this region, but because it's an end, it's the second from the end, rather than moving in the X direction, we could also slide it. So if I slide it along that line, which is the point between those two CVs, or the line between those two CVs, then the hope is that it stays a bit closer to the surface, because obviously the surface is rising up in Z. If I just move it in the X direction, we're not going to capture that. We're going to dig it into the data. If I use the slide instead, then it rises up at the same time as going backwards. So I would rather do that. It is not going to be by any means perfect. It's just hopefully a bit closer. Same thing on this one. We could pick that one, which is the line between that CV and that CV, and that'll go up and down in Z as well as in X when I move it. So this one, as I say, that's a straight line. This is curved. So we're looking for slightly curved, more curved, more curved, more curved, a progression between all of those. Now this point here, I'm still on the slide option there. It won't make much difference, to be honest, but if I use slide there, it's actually the same as moving it out in the Y direction, in fact. So I don't need to switch to moving it in the Y direction particularly. So this, in this sense, we've got this edge going here, which is some sort of S shape. And then this one will be less of an S shape. It certainly doesn't want to do that. So we need to move that point out. So this is moving it in the Y direction. I'll move that one that far and then just pull this one in a bit. So we might be able to just put a straight line between those. You know, maybe that will do the trick, or certainly, you know, tidies it up. Whether it's correct or not doesn't really matter in a way, because we're just going to have to modify it anyway. So, you know, we could, rather than moving those around, I could just really say planarized hull. So let's open the menu, just check what we've got. So we always want single. These are the options that you nearly always want. I very rarely change this. So single view based, in other words, looking in this view, if you imagine a straight line between that point and that point, it's going to put these CVs on that straight line. And then closest boundary means it moves these CVs up and down the end tangent lines. So in other words, that point to that point. So it's a bit like sliding. It's a bit like if you used the slide option and moved it along there. You're doing the same thing, but it's making sure that that CV ends up on a straight line between all of that one. And because it seems to be like close enough to a straight line, let's just see what that does. So let's do that. It just means it's a way of tightening up. And if it's close enough, it's fine. I mean, there's no reason to think that that might not be okay. This one, if I make that a straight line, it's going to pull it inside the intersect. So it's sort of, I mean, you could do that and then extend it. That would be a way of making sure that everything's perfect in this view in terms of the pattern of CVs. I'm going to choose not to do that, but it doesn't really matter one way or the other. The thing about these CVs, I would like, this one seems to go in a bit, so, but difficult to see. So I'm just going to rotate that, and I'm going to do a non-proportional scale on that edge, just so that I can see these CVs more clearly. And then if I go, so I'm going to move points just in and out. So I'm going to move that there. Move these CVs in and out. I'm not trying to get to, in case you wonder, I'm not trying to get to this intersect at all. I'm just trying to create something that's got a reasonable shape to it and that's actually outside of the intersect. So I'm not going to, well, I know this is going to mess it up, to be honest. If I extend that, which is what I was thinking I was going to do, I realised that's sort of actually not quite the right thing to do, because if I do that, it's going to modify this. It's going to make this line here, instead of straight, it's going to make it somewhere between that and that. So if let's just exaggerate it, if I pull that right out, you can see that second hull has now got an S in it. I didn't want that. So I've got to be careful to get what I want. So I'm now going to go and pick the hull here. So I'm going to pick all of those CVs along here. So I'm not going to, it's not the same as extending, because I'm only affecting these CVs here. I can either use, I can either move them in X, Y, and Z, but as I said before, that's going to, if I move it in the Y direction, I'm only moving it in the Y direction. It doesn't drop down in the Z direction. And in fact, you know, we set up that line so that it was a particular Z height and so forth. Probably better off to use slide, which means that, you know, we'll maintain the shape of that surface, the mesh, a bit better. I'm sure it's going to go, you know, it's probably way off by now in the Z view, but we'll have a look at that in a minute. So let's, I'll pick one of those arrows there, just move the whole hull outboard. So I'm just moving it outside that intersect there. We could go back in if we wanted to, and maybe having done that, I'm thinking actually I could pull these in a bit. Let's move those back up that tangent line. So as long as we're outside that intersect there, would be okay. Move that one back in again. You know, ideally this edge would be on this side surface, and because then we've got direct control. But the closer we get it to that surface, then we've got pretty much direct control, something like that. Doesn't matter too much. just the closer it is, the better for what we're trying to do. So let's go into top view. So I'm now going to look at that in front view, and I'll take the non-proportional scaling off. So we haven't changed the surface dramatically, it's not gone up and down too much because I've been trying to be careful with using slide as opposed to X, Y, Z in places. I am going to save that now. Now, I mean, one thing I said last time was about, this is not the only way of doing this, that I could have equally, and I know some people would do this, they would put in a curve there, build that surface, and they probably wouldn't go through all of these loops that I've seen to be going through. I mean, sometimes I go through the loops deliberately, sometimes it's because I didn't think ahead far enough. But I think the thing is not to worry whether you've done it the right way or the wrong way. It doesn't actually matter. The end result's the only thing that matters. And if I've gone, quite a long route to get what I need, it doesn't matter. You just keep pushing forward. That's the key thing. So on this, what I wanted to look at now is the CVs going this way. So if we look at the front edge, and it's quite difficult to see these here. So I'm actually going to take the sections off, but I'm going to isolate that surface, and I guess isolate the mesh, see what that looks like. We obviously want to be able to see the sections, but at the same time, it can be really difficult to see. So if I'm looking at that thinking, where the heck are all these CVs? I don't know, is that point on the third hull or the second hull? It's not very easy to see. I mean, the more you stare at it, the more you can see actually that is on the third hull. But it is quite tricky. What I often do is I go into front view, which is the most obvious view, but then rotate it down a bit so we can see it more clearly. So now I can see the CVs. I'm not quite in the front view, but it's enough for me to be able to get an idea of what the Z values should be. The front edge, I think when we go back into front view, is almost on a constant Z, not quite. Let me go back into the previous view here. So that's where that is. Back edge is pretty much flat, but we should start with the back edge really. In fact, I need to go and pick some more data because I'm missing a bit of data there. The way I split it up. So let's go and pick that. So the back edge, let's start with the back edge, because if we get that right, then the ones in between need to be proportional to that. So the back edge has to meet this section better, and we're very close to where that section is. And so if I go into CV, and now bear in mind we've set this all up in the top view or plan view, so we've got to make sure that when we move these CVs, we don't change that. So the way to do that is to go into X, Y, Z. We only move these in the Z direction. So we'll move that point there down. So I'm close to the data there, and usually you move one down, and you'll find that inboard of that is cutting into the data. So I then move that one up. You might also want to move that outboard actually. And I know that I just said we're not going to change this in plan view, but I'm thinking, well, these are a bit close together, and they probably need to be a bit further apart so we get more of an acceleration. If we looked at in terms of the curvature, so if we looked at the curvature on this surface here, we're going to have a fairly flat, I can see from the CVs, that's going to be a fairly constant curvature, whichever way around that is. That was a good guess. So you can see that's pretty constant, and it's because the CVs are equally spaced. So to get this sort of acceleration, so we get a flat area in here and it starts to pull on that outside edge, I'm going to move these CVs outward. Now I know that's going to affect the top view, so let me go back into here, and I'm just going to move that out to the Y direction. So you'll see if I put the curvature on, so I'm moving that point out in the Y direction, the curvature does more of what we want. In other words, it starts to tighten up on the outside edge there. Not going to do too much because it does need to get into a very flat area here. and we're going to have to transition to that. But it's just a subtle thing that we need to do. So what I do need to do, because I've moved that in white, I know in the top view that's now messed up my straight lines. But I pulled those points out, but actually, and I was saying, well, we probably need to straighten that up again, but actually it's absolutely fine because, we've got a straight line between there and there. That's what we had, and that point's moved slightly outwards, but that's fine because it's moving around the corner anyway, so we don't need to worry about that. So I'm not going to adjust anything in that view at all. So let me just go back into front view, rotate it down. So we've got this back edge. And then what I'm now going to do, obviously this is too high as well. We want to try and rotate that as much as we can, just something like that. But now the mesh is interfering with being able to see there. It's quite difficult to see. So if we go into this menu here, so we've got mesh density 0.8, so we can reduce that. Oh, got rid of it all completely, or just put it a little bit on. You've also got transparency, so you can actually, yeah, the mesh. I suppose the mesh density. You can either leave that on pretty full, and then put mesh transparency up, which will get rid of it. It's probably the best way to do it because it's obviously you've only got to change that mesh transparency. For some reason, that's not updating because that mesh density should be updating and becoming more dense again, but I don't know why it's doing that. Probably because I'm in the wrong menu. That's why I'm looking at the wrong menu. It's this one. Yeah, there we go. So that's mesh density where it's got every single point, and usually it's on about 8.8, I think. But if you put that on fully, but then make the mesh transparency very high, then that helps the view. If you really want to get rid of it, just put mesh density right down to 0. So all we're seeing now is the sections. And in this case, that's probably the thing to do, to be honest. Just got to remember that's why we can't see the mesh, is because I've turned both of those things right down in terms of being able to see it. So this area still can't see these CVs, so I'm going to use non-proportional scaling there and zoom in. So we can see the back edge has got this pattern to it. The next ones need to have a similar pattern. So if we go into moving these CVs, again, we can only move these in Z, otherwise we mess up the pattern plan view. So let's move that one down. We're going to have to move multiple ones to get this to work at all. So I'm just going to move these points up and down. So we'll move these up and down. So what I'm trying to do is get the pattern here similar to that back edge, and at the same time get a bit close to the data. So it is a question of moving multiple CVs around here. Now, what we found before is that because of the nature of the tool used for creating the mesh, we're not expecting that to be 100% perfect to follow. So we don't need to follow it exactly. We just want to get approximately in the right place. We also need to look at these points. We've got this one here. This one's a bit difficult to look at in this view because it's halfway between here and that sort of pattern. But this one is more like a bit easier to see. I mean, the data here, I think. Well, actually, the other thing that I've just been caught out by a little bit here is that, of course, we've got this side surface, so we don't actually want to bring the surface right down to this point. We want to actually ignore the data from a certain area because we're just trying to create a theoretical intersect between this and the side surface. So, in fact, this does need to go up, but still have that sort of pattern. But the pattern is gradually reducing from going that way to this way, so we've got to bear that in mind as well. So maybe something like that might work. We're getting the section that we want. We just have to I mean, I'm just going to do this and then go back and have a closer look at things. Maybe this one needs to go up a little bit here, so let's move that point and that point. Bear in mind this pattern is a bit strange because it's going one way and then the other. So you have to go backwards and forwards. You have to look at the, you look at the detail and then you also look at the big picture. Every sort of, it's slightly high on the centre. Don't think that's particularly important. I mean, it's actually spot on there. So, like I say, we're taking the mesh as a guide. Now, to make this even more easy to see, let's just isolate the surface, and I'm just going to take the sections off. So now I'm literally looking just at the CVs. That's all I'm interested in. I'm going to save this. So I know I'm quite close to the data. I know I've got the sort of pattern that I want, but now I want to take it, just improve the quality as much as I can. And by just isolating that one surface, we can see very clearly the CV pattern. So that one's quite gentle. This one's actually a bit more severe, but that doesn't mean that's wrong, because you think about the shape of that roof, that's probably correct. The next one's a little bit more severe again, and then it starts to gently come down. So I'm looking at it directly from the X direction. The only one that I can see that looks a bit odd is if you look at that angle, and this one in between doesn't quite fit. It's that angle, you'd expect this one to be more of that sort of angle, somewhere between that and that. So I'm going to just, without looking at the data, I'm just going to move that point slightly upwards. If we just try and do it in one point, if I just move that point up and try to get that line halfway between the two, then what we're doing is we're creating quite a big change. If we move that up maybe halfway and then move this one down, then we're doing small changes in two places. So I'm hoping that that will be better in terms of where the data is. So let's bring everything back in, and we'll put the sections back on. And we'll just isolate, still difficult to see with all of everything going on. So just isolate the mesh and those CVs, and I seem to have not quite got everything. So while I've got everything picked, I'm using hotkeys here, so I should tell you what I'm doing. I'm making this visible, display visible. So display visible, it's going to bring back everything. I've still got these things selected, so I can now add to that by picking. If I pick carefully, I'm going to pick another object, which is this mesh here. So I've now got that, and then I'm going to use display hide unselected, or Alt U, which is what I'm using here. So Alt U just means that I've added something else to that selection. So I know what I did here was move these points, and actually when you look at the sections, it's pretty close. I moved that one up, that one down, and we're still pretty close to the section. So you often find that once you're down to this level, you can just isolate the surface with the CVs, so you can clearly see what they're doing. Move stuff by small amounts, multiple CVs, and you go back to the data, and you'd be often surprised how close you are to where you want it to be. Now the other view, so we've looked at that in front view, which I'm happy with. I've looked at it in top view. I'm happy with that. The other view, of course, is side view. So that looks a little bit odd because I'm looking at those lines here. But maybe that's okay. There's nothing to say it's wrong, really. I think these lines, they do progress in terms of the angle. It just looks a bit odd there, the sort of lengths of those lines. But bear in mind, we're creating something very big here. I think I'm just going to leave that as it is. So let's bring everything back in. We need to look at this side surface now. If this was A class, if we're trying to get an A class result, we might go on for a lot longer trying to refine and refine. But we're not. We're just trying to create something that's close to the original mesh here. So what we now need to do, So we've got this is the old intersect. So if I go query edit on that, you'll find there's no history because oh no, in fact, yeah, I picked the wrong bit. So if I try and pick the intersect, query edit on that, there isn't any history. Yeah, every time I pick it, I'm accidentally picking that surface, which is of course has got history because it was a symmetry function there. That intersect is now dead. It's the intersect that we had originally. So what you've got to be very careful of with curves on surface is that you can leave a lot of curves on surfaces behind, which are no longer useful. And the problem with that is that you then end up with problems trimming. So every so often, I would highly recommend you just go through the model, delete any curves on surfaces that you don't need. And when you're trimming, always make sure that you haven't got any old curves on surfaces there, because that's something that can mess up your model. So I'm now looking at this, and in terms of these surfaces, so I want to get back to this surface here. I need to join these up. I did have some curves there. I think they must be, hopefully, why am I not seeing those? There's a curve around there, which I'm sure I had before. Let me just save this to see what's going on. I don't think I've accidentally deleted it, but it's always a possibility. Let's just check these layers. I think I might have accidentally deleted it somewhere, or it's gone somewhere. I had a nice curve there. I think it's gone. But what we can do is, if I know that curve was there first thing this morning, so I could recreate it, but I just won't go open recent, go back to the one that I had this morning, which was would be that one. No, it won't. It will be that one. That was the one. Yeah, I must have read that one in first thing. There's our curve. I don't know which layer that was on, but obviously I messed up and got rid of it somehow. So I'll do Control C on that, go back to the one we're in, Control V on that. Now, if you're familiar with stages, what stages are multiple models. So we've now got two models open. So if I go into the stages editor, I mean, you can see what the models are. If we go there, you can see that we're now in this one, the current one, and then that's the old one this morning. So if I go into the objects editor, in here, you'll notice the other thing here is let me just hide that curve for a second. So I'm using Alt and I, or display invisible. So it's just going to make it invisible for a minute. You can see there's a green line there, which is actually the other model that we're seeing. And the other model here is an eyeball there. You can switch that off completely so you don't see it. So usually I've got most of those switched off unless I want to compare two models. But the other thing I want to do is I don't really want this model in here. So I'm going to pick on that here. So the working model, which is the one we're in, is that one. I can obviously go between the two here, but I will want this one. I want to get rid of this one. So I pick that one and then delete it, delete selected stage. That's okay to delete. But sometimes, certainly when I've been working for designers, what I've done is I've had multiple stages where one is a fairly complete model trimmed out, the other one's complete work in progress in all the pieces. And that's very useful. The only drawback of that, having multiple stages, is if the model crashes. Sometimes Alias crashes, as you know. So what I've done before, just to make it even safer, is to open another session of Alias and have my clean model in that session and the dirty work in progress model in the other session. So if the work in progress session crashes and the designer comes up, I've still got a model to show. Right, so now if we go to display visible, bring that curve back, it's on some different layer. I think when I did a paste, there are different options. So let me just actually get rid of that, because I can see that's on the wrong layer. I wanted it on the green layer, and I really want it on this curves 4 layer. So you've got some options when you paste from another model. If you go into edit paste and hit this window there, what it's saying is that in this case, creation layer, in other words, the layer that we're in, So it put that curve in that layer top. If I want the same layer as I had in the other model, I can just say same layers and then just press go. And we should find, hopefully, that that's now green and it's in that layer if we had the same names in the other. So that's worth knowing that there is a difference in pasting. You can either paste the creation layer, which is the current layer top, or the same layer as the other model, which is often very useful if you're doing stuff, well, if you're doing what I've just done. Now this line, you can see it doesn't align with this anymore, which is not surprising. I want to get rid of that curve because I don't think that's doing anything, and I just want to get rid of it. It will just cause confusion otherwise. And I just want to make sure that this curve is aligned to this edge because I'm now going to try and start building a surface around here. So let's do that first. So I'm going to go into Object, Edit, Align, G2 without letting on. Align that into there. And I'm going to align that into there. I've got history on there. So if I queue it or query edit it, I'll get that. So I can actually go between moving these points around or activating the other end and moving these points. So it's almost like having a blend curve, but it's what I prefer to use these days. So that's going to be my edge, and whether that's accurate or mesh doesn't matter. It's just I'm free to change it at any time, of course. Now the tricky bit here is we're going from a very flat area to a curved area, and we've also got this edge where it's flat across here and it tightens up. So the way I'm going to try and tackle this is I'm going to try and do this bit in the middle as so this area here is going to be a continuation of this surface in some way, or a blend from here to here. I'm going to try and do that. And then this edge piece where it starts to curve around, I'm going to do as a separate surface. And then I'm going to try and get that all to work, which is going to be a little bit tricky because the problem with this, if I create this as a surface coming around here, we've got, and if I did that as a four-sided surface, maybe I should just try and draw this for you, my plan. So let me get the snipping tool. And go up into Alias. And we'll just do this. So my plan is to try and do something like this, where we've got this edge going all the way from here. Probably won't draw this very well. So if I did that, have a little edge of this surface, and it comes down here. Now, if I was just to finish that off like that and put that edge in there, that's not nice, because the problem is we've then got this corner ends up at 180 degrees. It's got zero angle between the two edges, and that's not a good thing. Never a good thing. So we want to get rid of that. So the way I'm going to have to do this, and this is where it's tricky, is this edge needs to go further around here and do something like that. So we've got a proper four-sided surface. The difficulty, and I really haven't thought how this is going to work, is going to be, well, I'm actually thinking of it at the minute, but if I choose another color here, the difficulty is going to be along this edge. That because that's going to be an intersect, there's going to have to be an intersect between this red surface and that back surface, then we haven't got any control over it, or direct control, which then means it's probably going to have a bit of a wobble in it. So, and I'm just thinking, off the top of my head here, and this is the sort of, thought process that you go through with these things. So I'm looking at that thinking, well, that's not really going to work. I can see that. Snipping tool, it's not a great tool, is it? But, so let's go into red pen again. So rather than making this edge an intersect, which then means we have no direct control over it, and it needs to be a really clean edge there. Let's make this edge an edge, a proper edge. So we'll try and do this. So if I have an edge of the surface coming in here, again, I am thinking, drawing and thinking at the same time. I'll come up here, which looks similar to what I said we shouldn't do. We've got an edge there, that's pretty obvious. But then instead of tapering this down to nothing, if we made that surface go inboard of this green line and do this, I've drawn it really, really badly, but that's supposed to be following that green line under there. And this is very badly drawn, but it is the principle of it. So what that means is that then back to our custom pen, maybe green is not the best color because we've already got green there. Let's change that to fuchsia. So what this means is that instead of this edge being an intersect, it's going to be this edge is going to be an intersect. Or, well, not necessarily an intersect, but we can make this surface actually align in G0 into this red surface. And because it's going around the corner, it's got lots of shape in it anyway. Any slight wobbles in that you'd never see, whereas that one is going to be crystal clear. If you have wobbles in that, you're going to see that immediately. So that's my plan at the minute. Now the center bit here, running out of colors here, but let's make it blue again. Hopefully we'll see this. So we've got this, we're going to have a surface coming, we've got this surface coming down here. We're going to continue this surface into here. Probably need to make it a bit bigger. So there's going to be a surface down here that's actually going to join up to this point. So it's going to have to go from there right across the other side, something like that. And all of this is going to be cut away. That's all going to be trimmed out up to where this other surface comes into it. That's my plan. Whether it works out like that is another question, but that seems to be a possibility anyway. So I'm just going to keep that to one side because I might want to refer back to that and remember what I just said. Now, going across here, we want to set up this surface going around here. We also want to extend this. So let's start off with the maybe slightly easier one, although it probably won't be, is getting from here to here. So I don't know when I last saved, but it's always worth saving. 10 minutes ago, a good point to go. Now getting from here to here is slightly tricky, but if you remember, I did have a surface there, which is the original surface that I've been trimming from. So why not use that? We sort of don't know how. I mean, I might not use it, but I can't remember whether it actually touches that edge or not. So I'm going to just measure from here to here. But if I can use it, then all well and good. It's a long way away. It's 30 mil, but I can still do a trim convert on that. Just going to isolate that. So I'm just going to do Alt U to get rid of that. These are all dead curves on surface. So like I said before, clean them up whenever you see any that are no longer useful. I also noticed it's got a history on. I want to get rid of that because the danger is I could change it accidentally. So I can go into delete construction history. I've got it set up as Control Alt H. So that's the hotkeys that I use. Delete that just to make sure it doesn't move. And then what I'm going to do is use Trim Convert, which is a great tool for just reapproximating things. I'm just going to see if I can do a Trim Convert on this. So I'm going to go into Surface Edit, Trim Convert, projecting in the plan view in the Z direction. I want to keep the original, so I want to keep that one because it's been useful so far, so it's probably going to be useful again. So I'm going to trim it to this edge here, to pick that area, and that is not being very useful. But let's just undo that, revert. We can just press the space bar. So because it's got such a low degree, it's not particularly useful. It's nowhere near that. This may not work out, of course. So let's just make it degree 7. Why not? See what happens. So that could be useful. It's a bit weird, but we're going to trim this down, so maybe it will work. I might as well just try it anyway. You can always chuck it in the bin, but it's often I like to recycle surfaces and use what's there. Now this looks incredibly odd, and you think, why the heck are you bothering with that? And I'm wondering that myself, to some extent. But if I put the symmetry on it, first of all, if I extend that back inwards, well, if I extend it back in with those CVs, hopefully we start to sort themselves out. I mean, if I took that all the way in, they find that they look quite tidy. What's not so good about this is when I do this, sorry, that's extending it. It's because it's actually starting to, if you take it out, it starts to wrap up on itself. And the system's not quite sure whether I'm trying to make that shorter or longer. So I'm trying to make it shorter. If I bring that into there, for example, the right hand hasn't updated. It's only when I let go it updates. So you get these CVs looking a little bit tidier than they were. They're still rubbish, but closer than they were. Now I said we wanted a surface which goes to at least that point at the end of the curve. We might as well make it slightly over that size, just it gives us a bit of extra surface there to deal with. You can see the CVs here are not very good. CVs here, they're okay, but we won't be matched. We were not aligned to this edge here, but we don't actually want all of the surface. So I'm going to now, the other way I can do this, rather than, I could extend this backwards this way, but since I'm zoomed in here, I might as well, just going to pick that and that so you can just see a bit clearer what's going on. I just want a surface which is going across here somewhere. Now, what I could do is if I go into surface edit, object edit rather, and we've got attach and detach. So I'm going to use detach. So we don't want to keep the originals, we just going to say go. So I'm going to go in here. It says we've got construction history, which is the symmetry. Again, another case where the symmetry gets deleted. So this is just a way of dividing that surface into two. If I say go, we've now got two surfaces. So this one, suddenly the CVs are looking a lot better. And this is what happens as you reduce the size of the surfaces. That's what tends to happen. Now, I don't know whether to, I mean, in that view, they look awful, but let's have a look at this. First of all, we need to align this to this edge because that's not correct at all at the minute. Now let's go into the top view. If I try and align this surface to that edge, then what tends to happen, because that's like, I think something like 25, 30 mil away from this edge, you'll find that that point comes inboard or something. So we don't get these on perfect Y sections, which is what we'd like ideally. So if I go into a line here and I go G0, it's going to be a partial edge. I usually forget that it's partial edge. If you've got create history on, it doesn't actually matter whether you forget or not, because you can just going to do it to show you. But if I just go and pick that, oh, forgotten partial edge, you can just say partial because you've got history on before it. It's the auto update rather than history, to be honest. So auto update, you always want that on in every single menu you've got. Always put that on. Now you'll notice maybe that point's been pulled slightly outwards, and the reason is because it's dropping that point not in the Z direction but normal to this edge. Unfortunately, there's no way of fixing that in the align menu. So let's just undo that. So the thing that we want to do is, rather than using this edge, we should make a curve on that edge. So we'll go into curve edit, duplicate, no rebuild, so just copies that edge basically, and we'll do that. And then we can bring that surface in. So we look at that. Now what we want to do is trim these curves back to those edges. So if we just go into trim those that curve to that edge. Now you probably find, which is what I've just found, because these aren't 100% accurate, it's not doing anything. So although it's trying to trim it, this line doesn't cross this one. So we would need to duplicate curve is incredibly useful. So we'll do it on those edges as well. And I don't know whether I've got that one, to be honest. No. So I need to do that one as well. And then if we extend those, so I've got extend is on a hotkey E for me. We extend those curves, and then we can trim that curve back to that one and that one. And we don't need these curves now, just get rid of those. Now when we align this, we can do it to the full length. And so those CVs at the end will only go down in the Z direction. The ones in between might go off slightly, but that's, well, we just have to accept that for a minute. Let's just align that. So with G0, I'll take partial edge off because I want to go right to the end. Surface there. And not surprisingly, there's going to be a gap because we've got different distribution of CVs along that back edge to what we've got here. When I do that as well, if I look at this from the rear view, so we've got a surface there. If I just revert that, you'll see what we've just done there is just align that to that. So just move that end there. I mean, you'll see it even clearer from the end. But if I just do that, then it's going to be not very, the rest of the surface is just going to have a big lump in it. It's going to be horrible. What we want to do is blend that across the whole thing. So again, we've got auto update, so we can see this happening in real time. The other thing that's useful is proxy display. It shows you what the original looks like. So if I just align that again, so from this view, you can see that's just screwing that up. It's just making an awful shape there. Proxy display is, if I switch that on and off again, I don't know whether you can see that very clearly because it's very faint, but there's green lines here showing you the original, and that's often useful to be able to see. So the green lines are everywhere. You probably can't see that, to be honest, so I'm going to switch it off, but it's there should you need it. So that's just screw that end up. Don't want that. I want to blend it. So if I put blend on, nothing happens. I need to say that I want to blend several of these holes or rows. It calls them CV rows here. It just means holes. So if I do it to one, it's going to make this better. And I'm going to gradually do that across the whole thing. So now I've made all of these similar to this, but it's not really taking into account this one. So again, we've introduced a lump, but now it's at this end. It's just destroyed that. If I wanted to keep that end, then, and I use blend factor, I can go between here and there. So we keep that pattern, and then these progress from this end to there. So we've now got a smooth shape. But in fact, I want to change this one as well because that's horrible, and I'd rather it was like this. So I'm actually going to extend this to 5. So it's now taking the 5th row. Didn't seem to have changed it much because I've still got blend factor of 1 on. But if I put blend factor of 0 on, get that, which is in this case probably not. It's still not brilliant, but it's better. To blend 0, you can sort of use it as a way of moving a surface to a new curve. So you can take the whole original surface and sort of move it to that new curve. If I put proxy display on, we'll get an idea, possibly, if you can see those very faint green lines, of what that's done. It's changed the shape completely to be more consistent with this end. So that combination of blending, extra rows including all the rows, and a blend factor of 0 is really, really good for reusing patches or surfaces in a model. So I use that a lot. Whether it's, I still don't know whether this is the best that it can be. It's still got lots of lumps and bumps in this, and I'm going to have to change this now. So we're probably a long way off between this surface and that surface. Really, this surface has got excessive number. The degree there, we're not actually 100% onto that edge, but it doesn't matter at the minute. It's 0.16 mil gap. We're probably going to have to get that tighter. Certainly, if we get this curve in, it all needs to be really tight to get this curve in and to get this new surface in for it all to work together. We've got to make sure that's as close to 0 as we possibly can make it. It'll just make everything a lot easier. We're going in this direction, so the degree in that direction, I'm not bothered that that's 7. I'm happy with that. Might even need to split the surface up, to be honest, to get it to align, or we might have to split this surface or something. But we'll sort that out at a future point. In this direction, I think degree 5 is excessive. We don't need degree 5. So we can make that smaller. So I'm just going to make that. Now when I do this, of course, the blend, we've got a history on with blend a minute. I'm just going to drop this down. I'm not sure whether it's actually coming up with a dotted line, which means it's that align function no longer can understand what's going on because I've reduced the number of holes in that direction. Now I'm not sure whether that actually matters, to be honest, but I think what we should do is delete the history on that. So I'm using Control Alt H in my case, delete that. So it's now back to blue, and we're going into changing the degree. I'm just going to make that degree 2, because that's all I think we need at the moment. I mean, I could make it degree 1, to be honest, but degree 2 is going to have some sort of curvature in it, so it's got to be degree 2 at least. But because of the size of it, I think anything above that is probably unnecessary until we find that we need that sort of higher control to get the shape that we want. So we're going to top view. We've got that. If I rotate that around, just looking at that top edge there, just going to have it. At this point, I'm going to save this model. So that surface there, came from the big surface that we had, which we did a trim convert to get this surface. But there's absolutely no guarantee that those join up in any way. If I shade them up, it's not very clear what's going on there. What I'm going to do in this case is to put some sections on. Now, because when I was looking at the mesh and trying to clear the view, I made the mesh invisible. So unless I've got rid of the mesh somehow, it should come back. If I drop the invisibility of the mesh, you can see some bits of mesh appearing. The fact that it's bits of mesh just means in the quality menu here, I've got the mesh density down to 0. It's actually not 0 because you can see still bits of it, but if I increase that back up to that level, you can see the mesh comes back in. So if you find the meshes seem to have disappeared, it's because in my case I'd sort of forgotten that I'd made that completely invisible and taken the mesh density down to nothing. But here I've got the mesh. It's actually the menu there is transparency, so I've made the transparency 0.9. Doesn't go to 1 as far as I know. Oh, it does go to 1. Okay, you can make it 1, but you've got to click in there. The slider only lets you go to 0.9, but you can have it quite high with the slider and combine that if you wanted to with the mesh. But in fact, with the mesh of 0.9, that's quite a nice display. It's so that you can see the mesh is there, but it's not interfering too much with what's going on. So I'm now going to go and have a look at sections. I'm going to apply some bisections to see what's going on here, because we've got this surface, and I want to bring the two together. And I'm not sure where I'm going to bring those two together. I suppose in some ways it would make sense if this edge was up here, because that's where the curve starts, and having cut it all back, that's probably, maybe not the thing to do. The fact that I've reduced this to degree 2 means if I try and extend this, which is what I'm going to try and do, it should behave itself a lot better than if that was degree 5, which you often find causes problems. So if you're trying to extend something a long way and you've got a high degree, just drop the degree down to degree 2 or even 1 if necessary, and you'll find it doesn't screw up so much. So I'm going to try and extend that all the way up to there, beyond this point, and it's actually behaved itself quite well. I mean, in some ways, that degree 2, let's just have a look at the sections. If I change that down to degree 1, what happens? So it has changed it. In fact, the degree 2, the degree 2 is okay, it's all going the right way, but sometimes you just want to make that degree 1, increase it to degree 2, pull the whole hull up. At least you know it's consistent then. Whereas this way, I don't quite know whether that's consistent or not. let's go with this. So let's pick that curve there, this surface here. So what I now want to do in plan view is I want to just make this much easier on myself, because I'm just going to extend that even further, and then I'm just going to cut that across in a straight line. So I'm going to put a curve there from here to here, extend that down here, and then I'm going to use one of my favorite tools, which is trim convert. Again, now last time I keep the originals on, that catches me out regularly, so we don't want that on. We want project Z. I don't want the original, no use to me whatsoever. There we go. Now we've got a nice straight line here, nice curve there. This one is a bit rubbish, so this is where I'm just going to, the simplest thing to do, although it's going to flatten the shape, is I'm just going to drop that down to degree 1. If I hit the space bar, that accepts it, and then I can go back into that function and just increase it to 2. Now you've got perfect pattern in that view at least. So now I can accept that. The only thing is, I know that that dropped that a bit. I want to get rid of this curve. That was just for trim convert. I'm going to bring everything back in. I'm going to take those surfaces there. Just look at those. I know this surface is quite good all the way through here, so I'm going to use that as my basis of what's going on here. So let me go into the transform CVs again. I'm going to use X, Y, Z. I'm just going to move that front row down, front those holes down until the sections start to come together. Now the problem will be transitioning from here to here. But although I put that edge where it is, that transition is going to be tricky, because I've got this is doing that shape of the tight edges. This one's much flatter because it's more like the rear edge. So getting from one to the other is going to be a little bit tricky. So now I'm going to pick this hole here, just bring it up so that the sections are similar. And the most important thing on this one is, because I've got to get to this back edge, I know that's correct. I've got to get to this area here. If you look at that section, you can see actually this surface under here is curved down. So, should we put it down there? If we do that, then we're likely to end up with an S. The temptation might be to increase that to degree 3. And if I now try and pull that down here and pull that up to try and get closer to the section everywhere, then what's going to happen here? I'm sure it's happened already. Let's get rid of these menus. That curvature in the U direction. Keep the V direction. Make that scale up. You see, there's going to be there's an S in there, which may or may not be what you want. I suppose what I should do is look back at the original data, but I was thinking that would probably all go one way, but maybe that's not the case. No, in fact, if I look at the original data, so let's have a look at that. Look at that from side view. It does look like it's maybe S's, I don't know. Let's have a look. Yeah, it does S. So it actually goes that way in that test, and that way. That does actually make perfect sense, to be honest. Yeah. So you have to sort of, you never jump to conclusions. You want to look back at the original data and see whether these, what's going on there. So actually, my initial instinct was to say, oh, that's all going to go one way, but actually I was wrong. So that's fine. So let's bring these in again. So in fact, if I get these sections to work together pretty closely, as closely as possible in the middle, which is what they're doing. So let's move these again. Maybe put some mouse sensitivity on there if you want to get them a bit closer again. At this stage, we're still changing everything, so I'm sort of perfectly prepared to change this surface if I needed to make it feed into this surface better. That way, you'll get the best possible quality surfaces. The easy way, in a sense, is you just cut that surface, align this one, see what happens, and that can work. But I much prefer to overlap the surfaces, to be honest, so I can see where this is going, and try and get them all to work together. So that's okay in the Y sense. I'm just going to save that there, and so as I say, the tricky bit is going to be getting this transition between the two. So if you go into cross-section editor, you can see it in the model anyway, but if I put the X sections on, you can see the difference in this surface in the middle to this one. So there's only center area where the two are the same. So it's getting from one to the other, and sometimes I just have to think about how we do this. We're going to have a surface going around here. Let's bring everything back. I'll put the symmetry on that because I know the symmetry got lost when we did detach and trim and convert. So it's worth putting that on every so often. Probably put it on that one or check it. Always worth doing. Now we've got this curve we know is aligned here, goes around here. So we're going to have to build. What I need to build is a curve. If you remember my picture, which was very bad, was I want a curve coming down here, which is sort of parallel to the green line for a certain amount of time, and then comes around here. Well, maybe these two surfaces, maybe one surface comes down here, which is completely parallel, and then it comes around that corner. That would probably be better, to be honest. Obviously, you can see already that I've changed my ideas of how this is going to work in some way, because this surface here is not that short. It actually comes all the way back to here. That's the surface that I've now created. So I've got rid of this line doesn't exist. We're going all the way back to here, and we're going to eventually that's going to be trimmed out along this edge to form the edge in there.